Hola. ¿Sí? Perfecto. So, yes, thank you very much for the kind invitation. It's really a pleasure to be here in Barcelona with you. Well, out of many reasons, actually my most favorite city on earth, so it's great to be here. And it's a pleasure to share with you my passion for lighting and to take you today on a little, let's say, on a little journey of light, showing you a couple of projects our office has been doing over the last years, okay? So myself, I'm a director at the German lighting consultancy, well, actually with the incredibly difficult name, as Birgit said, Licht Kunst Licht, which means, translated it would mean light art light. And we are based in two cities in Germany. One is in Bonn and the other one is in Berlin. And we work on many international and national projects, quite wide range. So we do many museums, we do office buildings, governmental buildings, many master plan projects. And besides the artificial lighting, we are really engaged into the use of the natural light source, the daylight and the sun, to make the most of it. So when I say we are a group of 26 people, 26 lighting designer, and we have a quite of a wild, nice mixed background. So many of us are architects or interior designers, but then there are people from the theater lighting design, there are product designers for the custom-made products, then there are electrical engineers, and we all work close together. So why did I choose this title for today? It's Austere Lighting, Timeless Design. It's actually, I mean, it actually reflects very well the way we work in the office. We think that less is more. We really try, well, when we work in architectural lighting projects, we try that the luminaire, the lighting object itself, is not in the focus of design, but rather the lighting effect, the lighting appearance it's generated is important. So for us, lighting is really the integrated part of architecture, as our famous pioneer Richard Kelly said once. Or let's take this grumpy guy on the left side. He's Adolf Loos. He's this super famous, or he was a super famous Austrian architect. And he wrote in the essay called Ornament and Crime, you might know it, how he really refuses any decoration and any ornamentation in architecture. And in a very similar way, we as an office see that. We don't see lighting design as a decoration. We think that it should support the architecture. And well, at the end, I mean, lighting is a very powerful tool. You create the hierarchy in the space. You decide with the lighting what's visible and what's invisible. So therefore, we should be very careful with it. And the best would be that you come into a space and the lighting is almost natural for us. It's almost yeah, self-evident. And also, just before I show you a couple of projects, I mean, when we start a project, we usually try to create a story, literally a story, like a poetic approach, because we feel that with the story behind a lighting project, the architect and also the client really is able to identify more with the result. So now I'm going to show you a couple of our projects, just a few of them, and tell you a few stories. The first one is a museum. It's a museum in Münster, which is in the north of Germany. And the museum project I'm going to show, it's actually extension building to an existing museum. It's in the heart of that city, just right next to the cathedral, as you can see on the left side. For the exterior lighting, we actually had this approach to have lighting from the inside to the outside. The only lighting we have here is the lighting installation you see on the left side. It's a lighting installation done by Otto Pine. And all we did here was actually just changing the light source from halogen to LED. And well, unfortunately, Otto Pine, he didn't see the result as he just passed away 2 months before the opening, as you guys might know. It was 2 years ago. So that's actually the view you see once you enter the museum. It's the foyer. It's a huge space, 3-story high, and it's spanned by this huge atrium, it's huge skylight. So we have a skylight, glass construction, and below that there's a membrane ceiling. And you have this nice play of light and shadow on that membrane ceiling during the daytime. So the space is filled with light. And all we wanted as a lighting designer not to touch that ceiling. And therefore we integrated our lighting into the side walls in little niches on the left and the right side in order to create very powerful direct lighting on the floor. And that space, the foyer, is often used as an event space, and therefore they could or they can change the lighting scenes and change the dimming levels. So for the visitor, in order to get to the exhibition spaces, they take the staircase on the left side. It's a very sculptured staircase, and we emphasize that staircase by a direct lighting coming from above. And we created this linear, long, black lighting slots you might perceive in the ceiling, which brings again a very directional, powerful light to the staircase. Now, once you come into one of the exhibition spaces, this could be how an exhibition space is illuminated. It's a very introverted version. It's basically lighting by projectors mounted on a track. But you could do also that. So we gave various options to the curator in the museum. You see that this perimeter ceiling, it's not actually a plasterboard ceiling, it's a backlit stretch ceiling. And what's the novelty? It's actually that we achieved that the walls where the exhibits are very homogeneously lit. And we used a little trick. Actually, we'll tell you the secrets. What we did was we used a specific spacing of the light strips behind the stretch ceiling. So those light strips behind the stretch ceiling, the spacing of them, they were increased towards the wall. So as close you get to the wall, the greater is the spacing. And therefore we could really achieve that homogeneous lighting effect, because otherwise, let me see. Oh, okay. Oh yeah. Otherwise, you would have a very large hotspot here if you would do a channel lighting. And that's exhibition space on the upper floors. It's a day-lit exhibition space. So what you see here, it's a huge skylight, with, again, a membrane ceiling below. Lots of daylight is coming in. And obviously for the exhibition space, what was important that we tried to avoid any direct sunlight. And to do that, we actually inserted micro prismatic louver on the top part of the glass construction, which only allows diffuse daylight coming in from the north part of the sky to enter the space. So there's never any direct sunlight, even though you have diffuse daylight, which is just beautiful. And in order to add the artificial lighting, we just followed the same principle as on the floor below. So yeah, to keep the consistency in the project. And that would be, again, the image you have at night, or yeah, really at night, where no daylight is entering the space. Another museum I'm going to show you, and many of you even might know, it's the Städel Museum in Frankfurt. It's funny enough that this museum all started with a competition, and all of the architects actually choose to propose a physical building on that site, a physical building as an extension building to the existing museum. The only architects, Schneider and Schumacher architects, they proposed to actually build that museum underground, below grade, and to connect the building, the museum space, by those circular skylights. And that's just amazing. I mean, Structural-wise and static-wise, this was a nightmare. I mean, they had lots of problems. But I have to tell you that this is my favorite picture. It's just beautiful. This bare concrete ceiling with the openings for the future skylight. I just think it's amazing. So obviously for the skylight, this is what when we as a light designer came on board in order to define how much amount of daylight and artificial light enters the space. What you see here is a detail section of the skylight, and I will explain you a little bit the detailing. So I start from the top. You have here the thermal construction. And then further down, you have here 4 layers of blinds which reduce the daylight. There's even a blackout, just to cut off the daylight. And then where you see the green lines here and there, we have the light source, the artificial light source, which is an LED. And further down, there's another diffusing layer. The whole thing has been done or tested on a one-to-one mock-up in Frankfurt in order to check, does it work? And also to convince the clients to pay the money for it. On the right side, interesting, here's an arrangement. It shows the positioning of the LEDs. They're actually tunable white LEDs, which means that you have 2 light colors. One is the 3000 Kelvin, which is a warm light, and then there's another one which is 4000 Kelvin, which is a cool light, very similar to the daylight, which then has been used in order to add lighting, artificial lighting, in case daylight fades. And then, you know, because we're in an underground space, what was important to us that you really feel the dynamics of daylight, that you look up and you have this link to the outside world, even though you're down in a basement, but we wanted that you don't have the feeling of a basement. So that's the final result. What was interesting that all those skylights are actually digital, meaning that we could address each of them. So let's take, for instance, that cabinet here, and let's imagine that we have very light-sensitive artwork exhibited there. We could actually reduce the amount of daylight and artificial lighting in there. So all of them are like very individually addressable. And that's the view from the outside. Now, we actually are doing quite some traffic and transportation projects in Germany. The latest one is a subway station in Leipzig, done by Max Dudler Architects. And that's the view of it. So imagine yourself, you know, taking the escalator, going down to a subway station. What you usually have is a very dark, claustrophobic place, and you don't feel very comfortable and safe. This is just the opposite. I mean, this is an underground enclosed space, and you have this hall, let's say, filled with airiness and lightness. And how did we do it? I mean, first of all, in terms of architecture, those walls and the ceiling have been constructed by semi-transparent glass bricks, and the lighting project actually was pretty easy. So imagine you have the envelope, glass bricks, and then behind that there's another layer of a concrete wall. So behind that there's in a certain spacing, a certain distance, a concrete envelope, and all we told them is that they should paint the concrete wall and the ceiling in white. And then we took fluorescent tubes and illuminated that white concrete wall and ceiling, and through the reflection of light we achieved that. That's it. So we have this super uniform diffused illumination, and we had to add actually downlights in order to create the sufficient illuminance levels on the platform. And as you see, there's some lighting points in the ceiling. There are specific glass bricks which were thinner than the other ones and had higher transparency in order to light through, and in order to achieve those 300 lux we had to achieve here. But also I think it's a nice add-on in order to give some sparkle and brilliance on the platform itself. Now, many of you might know the former industrial site of the pharmaceutical company Novartis in Basel. It became a mecca of architecture. I mean, Novartis, they decided to invite many, many top architects to build a laboratory building or an office building on their site. And we were happy. I mean, we were pretty lucky to work with quite a few of them. But what I wanted to show you today is that building. That's the first building you see once you approach the campus. It's the reception building. This is where you go, you register, you get your badge. And well, it's the first image of Novartis. And it's a very open, transparent building with a floating roof. But I mean, this ultimate transparency appears at night, where I would say those glazing walls, they almost seem to disappear. And you have, as you see, this super indirect uplighting to the roof. So if you ask me where are the light sources, I tell you, so the first one is behind the counter, which is here. And the second light source is just parallel to the facade. So there are linear uplights hidden in a technical trough, uplighting towards the ceiling. And the second project I want to show you is a laboratory building designed by the architect Klischenitz, Austrian architect. And here the briefing was to combine two worlds in one. There are the laboratory spaces on the upper floor, which are very technical. And then there are then there's the space on the ground floor, which they use for many events. And this space on the ground floor should be very glamorous and chic. At least this was the brief. So imagine you go inside and you're standing in this ground floor, and then you look up and you have that. So above the foyer, you have this huge atrium, which almost in a double-fold sense becomes a light well. It has lots of daylight coming in. And then we created this, almost sculptural element for the atrium, where we made those balustrades light active. They are backlit, and therefore, it almost becomes a sculpture and an interface between this technical world up there and what we have down here on the foyer. And here another nice story. So those rooms are conference rooms, and the client asked us to put a chandelier. They really wanted to have a chandelier, and we just refused it because we didn't want to have a chandelier because that does not fit to the architecture. So at some point we came up with proposing them, let's say, a modern approach of a chandelier. And as you see on the right side here, what we did, we were actually inspired by the experiments with the laboratory test tubes. So we took those laboratory test tubes and put them one next to the other and inserted lights. We inserted two different types of lights. There's an omnidirectional light at 2 heights, which gives the brilliance and the sparkle to the chandelier. And there's another light source, the reflector lamp here and here and here, to give a more directional light downward. Well, very different project. Sign Iron Works Foundry in a little but beautiful town in Bendorf, close to Frankfurt. That building is actually or was an iron cast facility. It has been constructed in 1830. And then at some point it has been abandoned, neglected, forgotten, and rediscovered just a few years ago as this beautiful iron cathedral almost. Today it's used as an art and cultural space for many exhibitions and also events. And I have to say that that project has been done by very, very low budget. So the city is very small and they didn't have money, but still we really wanted to do that project and in order to emphasize that beautiful light architecture and to emphasize the transparency. So So if you go inside, there are two main principles. There's one principle to emphasize the steel structure, and this steel structure, the rough material, has been emphasized by very cool lighting. Cool lighting in terms of light color. And then, as you see, the roof itself has been emphasized by a very saturated red-orange color. So I have to say this project was a hands-on project. It was not, you know, drawing dots and points on a plan. No, it was going there, taking the cherry picker, going up and choosing each and every single detailing and mounting position for the luminaires, because that site is cultural protected, I mean, like a listed building, and therefore we had to be really careful of where we put the luminaires. As for the ceiling, I mean, I have to say that our philosophy is not to really use colored lighting unless it has a meaning and it makes sense. And in this case, used the red-orange color as a symbol. Actually, it's a symbol for, you might imagine, I mean, for for the hot iron and for the fire, I mean, for what has been there before. And all we wanted that if visitors come there, we kind of bring them the history of the place closer by the colored lighting. And then a nice project, actually here in Spain, it's a hotel. It's Hotel Abadia de Retuerta Le Domaine, in very close to Valladolid. And actually just next to Zadón de Duero, who knows that area. And that hotel has been a former monastery. As you see from the aerial view, it has this typical layout of a monastery. It has as a centerpiece the iglesia, and then behind that it has the claustro with a little patio. So the church itself, it's going to be used nowadays as an event location, or actually many weddings take place there. And behind that, there's the claustro where all the public spaces are, the restaurants, the meeting rooms, and so on. And then the extension buildings, just here and there, they house the extra guest rooms. Then total 33 guest rooms and 3 suites. And then the client actually decided, no, hang on, we need something else, we need a spa. And decided to build a spa, but underneath. And that's the spa. So the whole project has finished not even a year ago, and it's really a beautiful setting. I mean, it's in between those vineyards and the Rio Duero just passing by. Look, I mean, this would be the view you have once you approach the hotel. And for the exterior lighting, we try to really only illuminate the main road and the main facade. And I have to tell you that it even appears more lighting than it is in reality, because at the end, I mean, this is a very rural area. It's pitch black at night, and all we wanted that the guests who come there and look up, they could see the stars in the sky. Here are a few pics of what we had or we saw when we first came on board on the project in 2007. It was pretty run down, and the architects, they took care a lot to very sensitively reconstruct the whole building into a hotel. In order to achieve that, this is a view of the claustro. Now, in terms of lighting, I told you that we don't use so much lighting objects. We try to integrate lighting into architecture and so on, but there are exceptions. And this is a big one, because, I mean, this is a listed building, and we had to interfere as little as possible into the existing architecture. Even the electrical wiring, everything, it was like complete nightmare. So it was very clear to us that if you do lighting, we have to attach something. We have to add on. We have to create surface-mounted luminaires. But then the question is, what's that luminaire? I mean, in terms of form and in terms of material. I remember the first we were thinking of glass luminaires, at some point we were even thinking of alabaster, and then we found this perfect match, I have to say. We designed luminaires out of massive bronze. We worked together with a local manufacturer, not here but in Germany, in Bavaria, a local bronze manufacturer who helped us producing a family of luminaires for the hotel. So we designed a family of luminaires just for that site. And well, why did we choose the bronze material? First of all, I think it has a very warm color to it, so it fits perfectly to the stone. And then also we found out that, wow, it's cool, we can actually polish the bronze and it becomes golden. And then we decided to polish all inner surfaces of all luminaires in order to get this really nice golden lighting for the hotels. And also, you know, that bronze, it's a material which you can use in a very thick material. So those luminaires are made of 7 mm thick bronze sheets. And it was important because otherwise, those luminaires, they just look lost behind or just next to those massive stone walls of the monastery. They really had to stand up somehow. And also, as a final reason, the bronze material is a material which ages with time, and it kind of fits perfectly to a monastery where you sense, you know, the history of the last 1,000 years. That's a view in the patio, and in the evening, because we have the illumination in clouds to create this nice silhouette effect. And well, I have to say, you know, when we went there on site, it hasn't been a particularly inviting, welcoming space. I mean, it's a cool space. It has been a monastery. There are very little daylight openings. And it was very clear to us that the lighting has to do the whole job. I mean, the lighting had to create a nice, cozy, homey ambience. And particularly in that space here, which is the refectorio, it was really difficult. We had a few test trials and failed. So the first one was to create a pendant luminaire. We thought of a ring luminaire with indirect and direct lighting, and we built like a dummy mock-up. But then we found out that we kind of break the space in two, and also the lighting up there didn't feel right for down here. And then at the end, we came up with a solution, which, to be honest, was not very obvious. We put floor lights. We actually used the floor lights we had designed for the guest rooms and just made a bigger version of it. Put reflector lamps inside in order to shoot up the lighting towards the vaulted roof. And also this reflector, floor light at the end, it gives a nice golden glow of light. And especially it gives light at a more human level, which I think at the end is the secret. Then you could go into that space, which is a wine bar, to test all those wines and also dine. And below that, that's the treasure. That's the wine cellar. And because the hotel is combined with a winery, I mean, you might know Abadia de Tueta. It's a very good wine, by the way. And actually, we were never allowed to enter that space without security guards. It's really interesting. And for the lighting, we also adapted a very simple solution. Sorry. We constructed a little arched bracket with electrical wiring coming from below, so we did not touch the walls. And then on top of that, there's a socket with a filament lamp on top. That's it. And that installation reminds us very much of like a simple wall hook with a candle on top, which has been actually the original lighting solution in that space. And then I told you that the client wanted to create an underground spa. And this underground spa had been connected by 2 patios with the outside world. That's one. And that's the second one. And we deliberately really did not want to eliminate that reflecting pool you see in the center part, but we wanted that space lives from the reflection of the surrounding architecture, the vegetation, and the lighting. And then finally we come to the indoor pool. The indoor pool, it has this centered skylight, so lots of daylight is coming in. It's beautiful during the daytime, but in the evening we really had to come up with something, and we designed a pendant luminaire just as part of our family of luminaires. And this pendant luminaire, it's actually a luminaire made out of bronze again in combination with glass. There are two different sizes, and we mounted those pendant luminaires at two different heights in order to achieve that effect we wanted, this effect of light and shadow on the ceiling and on the walls, which is just beautiful. And maybe just as another example, but I'm almost finished. Hello? Hello? Okay, I almost finished. So. Hola? Hola? Hello? Okay. So just as another detail, just at the far end of the pool, we actually have a little waterfall almost, and we illuminated the waterfall by in-ground linear uplights placed behind the pool, which gives a nice grazing of light to the water curtain. Well, I really wanted to show you that project because I said we don't use decorative lighting objects, but you know, in that case, I mean, there was the necessity to create objects, and I think if you create objects, you try to keep it very simple, to create a pure and simple design. And I think the design really feels right to the space and creates this austere lighting, which just feels perfectly, yeah, so the monastic feeling on that side. And that's actually it. Thank you very much. So, I don't know, maybe you have questions, anyone? No? Yes? Oh, come on, guys. Okay, this. So I hope you're happy. Then.
Thank you so much, Martina. It's a wonderful presentation where you shared so much information actually on all your projects. One question, how do you deal with international projects? I mean, all of these solutions require a lot of fine-tuning inside, right? How do you do that when it's a project in Dubai like you do?
Sure. I mean, do you hear me? Yeah. So in Spain it was easy because I mean we just could come and we have been here on site very many times, and you just come on one day, you stay for a night, and then you leave the other day. And even though it was difficult because I mean there are language barriers, the contractor did not speak only spoke Spanish. Sorry, that time actually I learned to speak Spanish because there's no other way, and it's okay, but it's great because I mean there's this cultural influence, and you learn so much also with the project in another country. So for projects, for instance, in China, in Shenzhen, in Shanghai, it's completely different. I mean, we have hard times because, especially because of the specifications. I mean, you do the specifications, and at the end, the specifications are just changed without you knowing. And then obviously, just with China, there's this huge language barrier. We even have now a Chinese colleague who is doing their whole job, talking to the client and holding the meetings. So obviously, doing projects in Germany, it's one thing, and we know our culture, we know how our brain works and how the client is. But being, let's say, with the clients in China, it's something we have to learn too. You know, it's not something with years we understand how the client and the architects work in China, or let's say in Doha. if you take Doha, it's not only culture, it's also the climate. I mean, it's great. We do lots of master plans in Doha. And if you think of the sandstorms, and if you think of the extreme conditions for the luminary, as it's a complete different world. And yeah, I would say it's learning by doing also. You know, once you do a project in a new country, you learn with time, and you learn how to understand the culture, which is very important, and learn the differences there. This is what I would say, or give as an answer to your question. Yeah. Good. So yeah. Yeah.
I would like to know, like, at what time of the design process do you usually come in? Because as an architect, well, I'm an architect, and I feel like nowadays, like, well, before, like, when you work with, like, when you worked in a project, you always try to have the natural lighting come in. Like, it was something that works seamless with the design process. But I think nowadays it's become like, in most, like, even in the where I work right now, like, they use it as an accessory sometimes, and sometimes it's actually very frustrating because you know that that building with the without the appropriate light and without the appropriate, like, um, experimentation with the space and in it, like, it could be more sometimes. So I would like to know, like, in your office and your experience, like, how do you work with the architectural designers? Like, when do you come in, and how do you manage, like, trying to solve your ideas with the original concepts of the project?
Yeah. Well, to answer the question, as soon as possible. It's obvious, but we always, I mean, I have to say, we always enter the project in the design phase, in your design phase, the architect's design phase. And obviously, sometimes it's too soon, and then also we do a couple of loops, which yeah, which is necessary to develop together a project. But especially because we do lots of daylight projects next to the artificial, we are called very early. And you know, it happened even that we changed the complete ceiling because we proposed them to change the skylights, and yeah, to give advice. I mean, very often it's only a consultancy, you know, to give an advice in a very early stage. Because, I mean, this is a very special thing to deal with daylighting. And yeah, even if you're an architect, this is not your specialty. And it's good to get that advice and to take it on board or not. I mean, but there's a lot of experience. And for the daylighting, I would say we come on board very early. But even for the artificial lighting, I mean, if there's anything related to the structure, to the concrete, I mean, you have to come early on board, and you can influence together as a team with the architects a lot if you come on board. I mean, it's very frustrating for us as well if they call us late, and then, you know, the architect is pissed and the electrical engineer is pissed because they have to change things because we want to change things. So this is not good, and also then we are also very limited in what we can do. So the best thing is obviously to come in early, and I have to say we are lucky to called in most cases, let's say, in a very early stage. Yeah.
How long you during a project like a hotel?
How long we do? So we started that project in 2007 and finished it last year. So yeah, let me think, 8 years. Yeah, it was a long journey. Yeah. Yeah.
And you use a software to calculate the illumination or something?
Yes, I mean, it depends on the project. I mean, the hotel project, actually, they asked us for calculation, which I thought it was ridiculous. I mean, who cares about lighting levels in a hotel? But we had to submit lighting calculations to the authorities. And yes, of course, I mean, we do lighting calculations, but then more, let's say, focused for office building or a museum. I mean, it depends on the project. If it's a lifestyle project, we don't do because it does not make sense. Yeah.
I'm curious about the lamp you designed for the hotel.
Hmm.
It was the bronze with the inner golden
Which the
surface.
pendant or the wall or in
No,
general?
the wall mounted.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, what color temperature did you use? You know, because golden reflection, it wasn't, it was like the right amount of reflection. I mean, as I saw, it was kind of a neutral color temperature, so you have just a little touch of gold.
Hmm.
Am I right? I mean, was it on purpose or?
I mean, to be honest, for the light color, we used 2700 Kelvin. We used a
Okay.
warm light color, which yeah, which combined perfectly. I mean, we did tests with the luminary. I mean, we had the luminary, we tested different light colors, and it's a LED light inside, and it just feels right with 2700
Okay.
Kelvin. Yeah,
So
that's
it gave the right, I mean, it gave intensity
definitely,
to the
yeah.
golden.
Yeah, I mean the golden finish, it just intensifies it more, and it's I would say a reflection material which is very nice for a hotel project and
Yeah.
also for, I mean the it's all about the finishes around. I mean the materials the architects uses, and for that project I would say it's fine. Maybe for another project it
Yeah.
looks kitsch, you know.
Yeah.
I think for here, because the massive walls are so brutal and have some masculine side on it, we could really use a feminine touch and bring in some golden, you know. Yeah,
That was really.
thank you. All right. So thank you very much for coming. It has been a pleasure.